Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a night at the Public House, Let Them Vote. My name is Nicole Sousa, and I am the Events and Outreach Manager here at Connecticut's Old State House. Public houses, taverns, inns, and other similar establishments were hugely important during the 19th century, which is our time period for tonight. Public houses were gathering spaces. They were rooms where you would hear news from your community and beyond, and maybe give you a chance to do a little bit of gossip. Tonight, our goal is to turn Connecticut's Old State House into another iconic gathering space and turn it into a pub for tonight. Please grab a drink from Thomas Hooker Brewing and our bartender, Nate. Thank you, Nate, for being here again tonight. And then we are going to hear some fun information tonight about Isabella Beecher Hooker and the Women's Suffrage Association here in Connecticut. Again, I'd like to thank Thomas Hooker and our bartender, Nate, as well as some surprises from CT Improv that'll be coming along tonight as well. But now I'd like to introduce you to our storyteller for the evening, Susan Campbell. Susan is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, a widely read newspaper columnist, and the author of 3 books. Yep. Just 3. Only 3. She has worked across the media landscape as an award-winning print journalist, a regular commentator on WNPR, and a guest on CBS's Sunday Morning, the BBC, WTNH, and the local news show Face the State. Please enjoy Susan's talk tonight. Feel free to ask questions along the way. And this is a public house, so if you want to get a little, within reason, rowdy, you're more than welcome to. We do have officers on site tonight, though, so don't get too crazy. And with that, I'd like to join you and everyone in welcoming Susan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll see if you clap when I'm done. You should get rowdy. I already broke some tongs over there, so have at it. Oh, God, it's pictures. I wanted to talk a little bit about the woman question, which I'm not sure we've settled yet, right? Did anyone watch one of the more recent Supreme Court confirmation hearings where the would-be eventual Associate Justice was asked to define a woman? Anybody here want to define what is a woman? Want to take a shot at it? Me either. And I thought it was an ignorant question, but that's just me. I just sat there. But we're going to talk, we're not necessarily going to answer the woman question, but what I want you to take from tonight is we have been talking about this for a very long time, and we still don't quite have our answers. Not what is a woman, but what is the sphere that's acceptable for a woman? And I'll start with, we're going to start with the 1860s, and just to ground you a little bit, the world, the nation is careening toward war. We talk about how divided we are now. I invite you to think back, 1840s, 1850s, and the big question was the scourge of slavery. The United States economy, and I highly recommend a book I didn't read, or didn't write, but have read multiple times, The Half Has Never Been Told, which talks about how our capitalistic system, the reason the United States could be an economic powerhouse was because we built our economy on slave labor. We did not pay these people. We did not even treat these people well. And the discussion was, can we continue that, because there's a lot of money in that, or should we actually stop and think about the impact on those people who were not treated like people? So slavery is the issue of the day, and if you're familiar at all with the abolition movement, you know that many of the women who continued to work for suffrage started in the abolition movement, maybe first suggested that women get votes, and were told, not your time, sit back, we'll get back to you. That was a lie on the part of many people who were men who were involved in the abolition movement. They were basically telling women who wanted suffrage, if you can just let us take care of this, and then we'll circle back, and we'll help you get the vote. Lies. There were several lies in that. So anyway, we've worked through that. So suffrage was put on hold, and I just threw this in. Hartford was booming. Hartford was Venice on Park River. Hartford had how many book publishers? 10, 12? Just an incredible intellectual capital, and not just for Connecticut. Oh my goodness. Yay, there she is. So this was my obsession. starting in, I don't remember the year. I wrote a book about her. I'm still researching her, and if you ask me why, I have no answer. But I came across her. A colleague introduced me to 3 of the Beecher sisters. There were 4, one named Mary. She was the only private Beecher. Everybody else was a public figure. Catherine, the oldest, who was an education reformer, more on her later. What was that one who wrote that book? Oh yeah. Harriet Beecher Stowe was a writer. She wrote a lot of books before she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. Don't lie, how many of you have read Uncle Tom's Cabin? Okay, that's not bad. It's hard to read, isn't it? And every time when the Stowe Center would have a 24-hour read and they would have people volunteer, I would get the N-word. I would get a page with that naughty word on there, and I would never, with this accent, you think I want to say that? I do not. But it was an incredibly influential book. And then there was Isabella, who was the half-sister of Catherine and Harriet. And a colleague at the Current came across these 3 sisters, grabbed another reporter and myself and said, we should write about these women. I missed the day when they divided them up. So one of them got Harriet. I was a little jealous. One of them got Catherine, and then they threw Isabella to me, and my first instinct was, oh, I don't know anything about her. And then my second, as a journalist was, oh good, no one's gonna know if I make a mistake. Never heard of her. I can do her, I'll do her. What's weird is while we researched what was eventually an insert and went out to schools, we all became these characters. Catherine Beecher, Valerie Finholm, became the bossy older sister with unrealistic expectations of the rest of us. Kathy Megan became Harriet, and I was the flighty Isabella. I didn't mean for that to happen, but I was so drawn to her because she is us. She was raised with certain expectations, and then the world changed. And she's left with these skills she was told were so important, but the world changed. Let me tell you a little bit about the fabulous Beechers. This was a family who, Lyman Beecher tended to wear out his wives, so he had 4. But Lyman Beecher was a congregational minister. He was a Calvinist, and if you don't know what a Calvinist is like, just a good definition is a Calvinist will stand at the top of stairs, throw him or herself down, pick him or herself up, and say, glad that's over. The world is not happy to a Calvinist. And Lyman would wear himself out and have to stop preaching and go plow a field for a year. I'm not kidding. There were some undiagnosed things going on with Lyman. Here's where he parted paths with so many of his colleagues. All of his children, he insisted, get the same education. Do you know how radical that was at the time? So Isabella learned astronomy. Catherine learned philosophy. Harriet learned mathematics. They were not allowed to strictly look at what women were supposed to know, which was kind of incredible, but also sort of sad because he was setting these women up for what were going to be their opportunities later. Turns out they all made their own. Okay. Isabella hit motherhood, and that was all-encompassing to her. And she didn't go out and start talking about suffrage, the suffrage movement, until she raised her children. She thought it was appropriate she wait until she do that, until she could raise her 3 children to adulthood. And when she got involved, she got very involved. I didn't mention her husband, John Hooker, of Thomas Hooker. Are you a hooker?
I love John.
He is, someone's going to write a book about him, and it's going to be wonderful. John Hooker was what was called a whole-souled abolitionist. In other words, he believed that slavery was wrong, that people who'd been held in slavery should be released and then join the culture. The Beechers kind of wiffle-waffled on that. They believed that slavery was wrong, and that when people who'd been enslaved were released from slavery, they should be sent back to Africa. But for so many of them, back to Africa had all the meaning that it would have for me. They'd been in this country for generations, and back to Africa meant they would need to adapt to an entirely new culture, and looking at it with modern eyes, something like the American Colonization Society was trying to skip over what was going to be an obviously difficult transition. Well, we'll just send them away. No. John Hooker was a radical and said, no, We enfranchise people who'd been held in slavery. We give them the vote. We let them buy property. We let them join. When Isabella Beecher met John, he was a law clerk in her brother-in-law's law office here in Hartford. She was a Beecher. I'm not quite sure we need to let formerly enslaved people join. And he gave her things to read, and he gave her articles, and he gave her books, and they argued. And their 2-year courtship was mostly the education of Isabella Beecher Hooker. She did not want to get married. She'd seen marriage already up close. She was the younger. She didn't want to get married because she didn't want to disappear under the arm of her husband. When she told that to John Hooker, she basically said, "You should probably be looking elsewhere because I am not her." And he said, "If I wanted that kind of wife, I'd get a dog. I want someone who will be my intellectual equal." So 2 years, and finally, this is so romantic, she finally said in a letter, and all those letters are over at the Stowe Center, and they are fascinating. She finally said, "Okay, all the family's going to be in Hartford in August. If you don't get a better offer, let's get married." Exactly. And then she raises her family, and she decides, I've got this big Beecher brain, I've got to use it. I'm going to put it toward the suffrage movement. Now, if you were a suffragist, not a suffragette, if you were a suffragist, what was attached to you was the assumption that you were a little loose. You were not a woman. The woman question, you answered it for yourself if you got actively involved in voting and trying to achieve voting rights. You know what I forgot to say? That you should interrupt me at any point, because I gave a lecture this morning in class. It was about a C. It wasn't great. So if I say anything and you're not sure, you want to add to it, pop up, say something, I promise.
Can I ask, you just said suffragist, not a suffragette.
Suffragette is so cute.
But is there a difference?
Yeah, suffragette is dismissive. Don't say it, ever.
And I have never heard the other one.
There were women who pushed for the vote who took umbrage at suffragette. It's like womanette, like it's not quite there. But they were actually activists, and they were serious. No, you're fine. It may just be me being a jerk, because I have a microphone, and so I get a little, don't you ever.
Too much power.
Too much, yes. She would have been in her 40s, late 40s. So she waited, she did everything. How many of us in here were raised to be a certain kind of woman, and then suddenly, oh, well, that's not going to work. I actually had a hope chest. Why would I have a hope chest? Because a man will marry me quicker if I have towels already, I guess. Right? And as I'm growing up, I would read about these feminists burning their bras. We know about how often that happened. And I thought they all lived in New York. And I thought, I can't wait to go to New York. I want to be a feminist. I want to see what that's like. But we are often, not just women, we're raised with certain expectations, and then the world changes. And that's exactly what happened with Isabella, which kept drawing me back to her. Wow, she adapted. The opposition, the people who were against suffrage, the suffrage movement, were every bit as vocal as people like Isabella. And what I'm going to show you is the conversations that went back and forth long after Isabella died. She never got to vote. I've often hoped that she, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, are somewhere in heaven knocking one back because they didn't get to vote. They died before it was there. The conversation would go back and forth. We could limit the conversation just to the Beechers because they argued about it too. But I broadened it a little bit just so you could see. I didn't go outside the boundaries of Connecticut. These conversations that went on saying, yes, women should be voting. They should hold office. And then no. Can you imagine why it would be no? Why not? Oh, don't, it's like an auction, I'll call on you. Are we sure women can take that kind of pressure? Are we sure the womanly brain can move in that sphere? Well, let's see. I say here that it was downright poetic, but this is where the opposition centered around these things. I'll read it for you. Fear of politics sullying the good nature of women. Women were paragons, and they needed to be protected. And if women got involved in politics, you know what's going to happen. Fear that women weren't smart enough to engage in politics. Fear of women getting a taste of power and then leaving their families, because they'll look at that wash tub and go, screw that, I'm out of here. This was the big one. Fear that women would eventually become men. You can see how that happens.
Women were chattel, so it would turn the economic system on its head.
Oh, now you're using logic. I'm sorry, we can't have that. Did you hear what he said? Women being chattel, if they joined the power structure, make sure.
It would turn the economics on its head, just like slavery.
It would turn the economic, now we got to work for a living. It would turn economics on its head. If women start to ask for something like equal pay, oh my God, we can't have that. The system is not built for that. Absolutely. Support came from, this is one of my favorite pictures. Support came from around the state. And when cars became a thing, women were very quick to take the cars to drive to the hinterlands of Connecticut and try to convince women and men that this was an important thing. This was the issue of the day. Can you read it? Oh, did I? Oh my goodness. Now, it doesn't take much of a historian to understand that the early suffrage movement overlooked a vast portion of women. It was really geared for white women, and also geared for white women who already were at least married to the power structure. This is Mary Townsend Seymour, and she's the founder of Hartford's branch of the NAACP. And she did send money to the women's movement, and she did it proudly, hoping that she would be somehow included. That is one huge oversight, and thank you, I didn't realize I skipped over it. But if we're going to tell the story, we probably should tell all of it. Okay, the opposition sometimes came spritzed in perfume. Do you know what I mean by that? That, of course you're a woman, and you're very important. Now stay in your lane, because you're raising children, and what could be more important than raising children? So, I don't know if you've ever heard of Henry Ward Beecher, another great book, The Most Famous Man in America by Debbie Applegate. When Henry Ward Beecher gave a sermon at his Plymouth Congregational Church in Brooklyn, New York, it was said that no less than a dozen of his mistresses were in the pews listening to him. He was awesome. No, I'm sorry, it was wrong. It's wrong to do that. He was involved in a court case over one of his affairs that I highly recommend reading the transcripts. They're incredible. This is what, I'll let you read it. I don't have to read it for you.
Excuse me, look, listen. I've been listening to this, I suppose it's drivel. I've been at the back of this gathering here, looking at all of you asking these questions, which, I mean, you don't have to ask questions, you don't have to worry, just take my word for it.
Why?
Well, it's just because it's the way it is, that's all.
Why?
Well, let me tell you. Because, first off, who even, you're gonna trust this guy's opinion? It looks like the Jeremy Allen White fella from that moving picture show, The Ursine. Right? Oh my goodness. Anyways, let me tell you. Because I oppose.
You want me to hold that?
I oppose the suffrage of women, and let me tell you why. Oh, boo me if you must, but let's be clear. There is an element of danger to some women, right? And other women, honestly, should take note, right? They should take note. There's also an element of danger, possibly to the state. And men and women should also, together, be aware. I apologize for that. I'm a gentleman after all. You see, this country, it's so full of history. And it was,
Do you need help finishing that
no,
sentence?
I don't need help finishing.
And I have to say, I love the First Amendment. I love arguing with people, but I don't find this all that entertaining.
I use the First Amendment all the time.
I bet you do. Let's all let this gentleman know what we think of what he's saying.
Boo! Boo!
You can walk away. It's okay.
I'll walk away now, but I will be back. I will be listening.
That'll
Because
be
this whole
awesome.
gathering is, what do the children say nowadays? Sus.
Sus?
Yes, sus. So I will be watching you with your sussities in the back. Thank you very much. But please keep it on the record. It's just...
I can help with that sentence.
No, I don't want
Okay.
help. I don't want help. Go on, please. The floor is yours.
It's so wonderful to have the other opposing side here. God bless America. You want to clap for him? The discussion of the woman question centered on there are two spheres in the world. There's the public sphere where this gentleman lives, where Donald Trump lives, where Joe Biden lives, where Nancy Pelosi lives, where the big questions of the day are decided. And it was assumed during Isabella's time that this sphere was only open to men, that only men should be in the public sphere making those decisions. And then there was the private sphere. Remember I said sometimes the opposition came spritzed in perfume? And the way that was handled was that, well, this goes back to the ancient Greeks as far as public and private. The private sphere was important in that it was habited by women, and they were there to raise children. And you've heard the phrase, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, right? That's a nod to the private sphere is so very important that you should want to be there. So I, as a mother, will raise my sons to rule the world. And then my sons will go out and using the things I have taught them, right, move well throughout the world. If I had had daughters, which I did not, I would raise my daughters to raise their sons to rule the world. So it was power once, twice, thrice removed. Got it? Oh. And let me share with you one of the biggest proponents on the public-private sphere and women's place in the private sphere. This is Isabella's oldest half-sister, Catherine Beecher. I mentioned she was an educational reformer, which is why what I'm about to say makes zero sense. She was adamantly opposed to suffrage. She believed, and she made her living writing books. She was like Martha Stewart on crack. She made her living writing books on how to raise children, how to run a household, having never married, having never had children. But she was the oldest of the Beecher clan, and she did, in the absence of subsequent wives of Lyman, raise her younger siblings. So she did have a few bona fides. Can you read that okay? You want me to read it for you? A large majority of American women would regard the gift of the ballot not as a privilege conferred, but as an act of oppression, forcing them to assume responsibilities belonging to man. Catherine, I know. I at one point thought I would write a book about her, but I would hate her guts, so it would be, here's some more. For which they are not, being women, and cannot be qualified, and consequently withdrawing attention and interest from the distinctive and more important duties of their sex. The private sphere. Women should be about raising children and stay away from the public sphere. You don't want to become a man, and that's what happens when you go into that sphere. Again, I could stay strictly, back to Isabella. Yes?
How does this coexist with the Queen of England at the time, who was governing, who was helping with legislation, and if you were to believe the miniseries,
The crown. Oh, the.
getting railroads going and all this stuff, and how does she exist in this world? And she's, in her head, was in that world too, but she
Yeah.
still did it. I don't understand how you see these people, and then you go, well, no, the women can't handle it.
The question was,
And also, she expanded the British Empire.
The question was, how could you think like this when you have a living example in Great Britain of a queen running things? And I can't answer that. Just as I have no idea how Catherine Beecher can be so adamantly pro women need to learn what men are learning, and then it stops. I can't draw that connection. I'd welcome anyone's input if you can tell me how to make that leap.
We weren't them. We rebelled against them. We had a different society. That was hereditary. We threw that away.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, that you're born into it. Like, it's either you're a man or you're a woman, and then you're in that role.
And it's royalty. We expect a lot different from them. Okay. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but no, I understand that. That makes sense to me. So this was Isabella's comment about her sister, when her sister went at her. And it's interesting because the Beechers went back and forth in public to each other. Also, in these letters they would write to one another, and paper wasn't expensive, but Henry would start a letter to Thomas. Thomas would write and send it on to Catherine. Catherine would add, and they would be writing in the margins. And these letters are over at the Stowe Center, and you can read these letters, and it's like reading a transcript of conversation with the smartest people out there. So they would also carpet each other in private, and then they would also do so in magazine articles, because as soon as Isabella realized that everyone has a voice, when she realized she had that voice, she used it. And so this was her thoughts about Catherine. Actually, Isabella at one point told Catherine, "You can't stay at my house anymore, you drive me crazy." Not to my knowledge. That was Catherine. Yeah. Maybe Isabella contributed to it, but it was Catherine. Catherine would write a lot of those kinds of books. Even while she was firing back at her sister, Isabella Beecher Hooker walked around feeling somewhat smaller than her big name siblings. Like, I can't go anywhere without being reminded I'm a Beecher, but I'm my own person, and I don't agree with everything they say, and yet here I am, I'm a Beecher. It's almost like, it also opened doors for her, so. This is Josephine Jewel Dodge. She's from Hartford. She was, and I was talking about this earlier, it's really interesting to see how these anti-suffragists nevertheless were very involved in social justice movements. And for Miss Dodge, it was the daycare movement. She absolutely was a pioneer in providing daycare for children who weren't very high on the hog, for impoverished children, for children living in poverty. So she could, again, I can't make this leap either, she could care about that and still believe that women should not have the right to vote.
Did you share why she felt that way?
She did write somewhat for a newspaper called Women's Protest, and it was a lot of the same kind of things that Catherine Beecher had said earlier. Women's place is in the home. They need to be raising their children. They can go to their factory jobs, but they need to come home and raise their children.
But isn't that more of a middle class problem? I mean, there have been women working outside of the home forever, but that always seems to be dropped out of the story.
The daycare movement?
Well, no, for women working outside of the home. And
Yes.
why is that such a revelation? Well, they're all working outside. They're all writing and doing what they.
Are you a politician? Do you want to be?
It's crossed my mind.
Okay. Please let it sit there too. You're absolutely right. It suddenly becomes an issue when women with resources start to talk about it. But women have always worked outside the home. Yeah.
Ms. Susan, who were some of the other anti-suffragists
There were a lot.
here in Connecticut?
There were a whole lot. Let me show you some.
Florence Griswold was one.
Oh, we'll get to her. Definitely. And again, Florence Griswold did so much to provide support for artists. And if you've not been to her museum, you're robbing yourself of a wonderful trip. And always in the back of my head, it's like, she didn't support suffrage? Okay. All right. Meanwhile, back on Earth, while people like Miss Dodge are saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. This doesn't want to play. Okay, I broke it. Talk among yourselves while I figure this out. So Isabella Beecher Hooker, as she started to give more speeches, as she started to push forward, as she started to, at one point she went down to the US Capitol and she didn't like the way the room was set up. So she reminded the senators that they worked for her and she'd like to be up where they are and they could come down on the floor and let her talk. And they did. She was becoming incredibly influential. She would get letters from women, even while her family was calling her crazy and dismissing her in every way they could imagine because they were embarrassed about her politics. She was getting this kind of letter, and I'll read it. This is from a woman from Norfolk, and it was written to Isabella in 1871, and excuse me if you can read it for yourself. This is, I write to you as a friend, as you are a friend to us. My husband's father buried his fourth wife a few days since. She laid down the burden of life willingly at 62 years of age. He will doubtless marry again soon, as it costs too much to hire a housekeeper. So when Isabella was feeling a little blue, she kept this sheath of letters from people like this. It's a much longer letter, and the woman's life sounds terrible. She married a farmer, and he looked at her as just another cow. So thank you, Isabella, for pushing this through. And I don't know if Miss Graves knew what it meant to vote, but she did know what equality meant, and she knew she was not living in a state of equality. So anti-suffrage posters included this: votes will turn women lesbian. Look at there. Get it? Yeah. Fear works, does it not? We've seen that before. Oh, it's great. Fear sells. They used to say sex sells. Fear sells better. And fear sold very well with this: the women are coming to take your jobs. Does that sound at all familiar? The women will become men. The women will start kissing women. Oh my God, so what if they do? This is Emma Winter Rogers. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 1891 with a Bachelor of Law degree, which meant she was very unusual. And she contributed to numerous publications, including a 1912 pamphlet that this is drawn from for the New Haven Equal Franchise League, which was one of the few early suffrage movement organizations that said, no, all y'all, not just the white women. They were very clear on that. And she writes, the historian of the future will record the marvelous change in the position of women as the greatest achievement of modern times. She had her house, she had feces smeared on her house for writing that, because women aren't supposed to want that kind of thing. Anti, Helen S. Harmon Brown, who I couldn't find a lot about except she was the editor of a newspaper called The Reply, which was based in New Canaan and was vicious about the suffragists. She looks nice. She continued opposing suffrage even after the 19th Amendment was passed. Bless her heart. Oh my God.
Okay. I've been in the back. I've been listening to even more. Hello. I know you're all glad to see me again. Hello. Good. Hello. Yes. Take pictures. Go ahead. I'm here for you. Okay. So, there's a few things wrong with what you were saying, of course. You see, the one thing that you haven't said is that there are duties that come along with the ballot.
Who wants to answer that? There are duties that come along with the ballot. No kidding.
Yes, but the thing is that the thing that this woman isn't telling you, that they didn't tell you, is, my goodness, that you would have to bear arms in times of war.
Not yet.
Oh, well, would you also like to serve jury duty in times of peace?
Yeah, I have.
It's boring. No one wants to do that. It's much nicer being home. Look, the right to vote doesn't matter that much, right? You can be home and be happy, and then you won't get your house smeared with feces, which I have done.
Oh.
Come on. It was deserved. I was trying to protect women.
Do I walk him off, or do you want to?
Oh, I see how it is. I see. Okay,
the mic.
all right, really, you're gonna cut my... Fine, my mic is cut, but you will not silence men, because men cannot be silenced. I shall be back.
Exactly, where the dog should have bit you. You know what we say in Missouri, right? Bless his heart, which is Missouri for what a moron. Don't call names, it's not nice. The fight then is the fight now. The people who scream the loudest are often the ones that know the least. No offense. This is from something that Catherine Luddington, who was an accomplished portrait painter and also was involved with the Connecticut Woman, and they called it Woman, not Women's Suffrage Association, wrote in 1916, and I will read it. Someone may say, we have been asked too many times to get up steam and we are tired out. Let someone else walk now. You see that on Facebook, right? I'm just so tired. Well, wake up. Can we imagine the armies in France saying this? No. They do not say this because there is no somebody else. Here's another anti-suffrage. You know the men are going to have to hold them babies. If the women go out and vote, men are going to have to help raise kids. You know where that's going to go, right? Exactly, where we are now. This is Helena Hill Weed of Norwalk, Connecticut. She was a graduate of Vassar and the Montana School of Mines. I wish I'd known her. And she was arrested multiple times. She was a member of the DAR. She had all her Connecticut props in line, and she was vicious about getting the right to vote. She was one of the first picketers arrested, July 4th, 1917. This is her shot. And she served 3 days in district jail in DC for carrying a banner. Her banner quoted the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Go ahead. Say what now? Threw her in jail, she got back out, and she immediately picked up another banner. After a while, they just get tired of arresting you. After a while, it's just not worth their time. Thomas Hooker. I won't play this, but anti-suffrage movement included songs, including this. The red rose was the emblem of the anti-suffrage movement, just as a white rose was the emblem of suffrage movement. And this song is truly horrible. And if you want to hear it, email me, slcampbell417@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link. It is such a dumb song. Back to Catherine Luddington, who said this: Connecticut is a conservative state, but it is not a backward state. And it seems too bad for the Republicans here not to get some positive statement on women's suffrage. They couldn't turn loose. They couldn't shake a Republican loose. Forget the Democrats, no offense. Read your history. They could not get the leading power, political power in the state, to say yay or nay to women's suffrage. Not only would they not come out against it, they didn't come out for it. Can you imagine why? I want to get elected. And if you don't know how I stand on something, score. Maybe you'll vote for me. And now we come to Florence Griswold. You can boo her if you want. The weird thing is that if you read the things that these suffragists wrote, you think, well, I don't agree with that. That's nonsense, but I see how you got there. In the same way you can talk to someone whose politics are way away from yours, and you think, that's not factual, but you can see how someone got there. And if you are starting from the belief that women are here for this purpose, then you can make all kinds of arguments. I mean, if we still haven't settled the woman question, that a woman can be anywhere she wants, then you're open to this kind of thought. She didn't leave a lot of writing about her anti-suffrage work, but she definitely was involved. They had the nicest things. It was the Old Lyme Society opposed to women's suffrage, and they engaged in fundraising activities that included teas and concerts and all kinds of neat things, all to keep women from voting.
And she was a businesswoman, which is like, you know, she didn't want to be, but she became a businesswoman.
Right.
She rented out those rooms to the artists, and then she wrote a $250 check to the anti-suffrage movement.
Go ahead.
I'm like, boom! Why? I understand you.
I think that's where I have to get off the train sometimes, because I don't understand how you can be that and be so dedicated and do such wonderful work, and then there's this blind side. Yeah, but girls shouldn't vote. Okay.
Or be in charge of their own money, which is
Or their
odd, because
bodies.
that's what she had to do.
Not their bodies, not their money, not anything. Boy, does this sound familiar. This is her association promised in 1915 to, this is quote, leave nothing undone that might help the downfall of the suffrage party, including smearing feces on suffragists' homes. Back to Isabella. That's way too many words, and I apologize. Anyone who makes a PowerPoint knows don't put that many words on there. So let me read it for you. I apologize again. You will never ensure domestic tranquility in the days to come unless you allow women to vote, who pay taxes and bear equally with yourselves all the burdens of society, for they do not mean any longer to submit patiently and quietly to such injustice. And the sooner men understand this and graciously submit to become the political equals of their mothers, wives, and daughters, aye, of their grandmothers, for that is my category, because women are surely people. Such a basic concept, such a tough thing for some people to swallow, even today. So, oh God.
Okay.
All right there, buddy.
I listened to your entire spiel, and before people say what they've learned, which probably zero, a big zero, correct? I just want to say one thing. You say, yes, women are people. I will say that, yes, but equal. Come on. I mean, if you want women to be in politics, I mean, have you seen politicians before? Have you seen them?
Yes, I have.
Oh, they'll go to any lengths, but women don't play fair.
They don't or they do?
They don't play fair.
Why should they?
Well, I understand, because politicians don't play fair, but I mean, women have certain advantages.
As in what?
We could be charmed by a feminine wild. I'm just saying.
Do you want to handle this or shall I?
Okay, why don't you handle this? Look, you've been switching. I don't know how this works. I'm not from this decade, century, whatever. Why don't you tell me exactly why my point is so wrong, that men should be in charge, and you shouldn't worry about all of this politics and war and being in the public. That's a job for me. Look how loud I am. I'm loud. Are women going to be louder than me? I don't think so.
One.
We are.
Yeah.
Oh,
One,
yes.
look at the way things are now.
Seems good to me.
Two, you need a little balance in those big houses. Anybody have a 3? I've got 15.
Go ahead, shout it at me.
Shouting means
If you have a point.
absolutely nothing. So if someone ever tries to interrupt you, be a journalist and just keep talking over them. Just as if they're not even talking. Because if they start up again, then you get right up to them and say,
Hey.
you need to go.
Back off.
No, I won't.
Why not?
You need to go.
I'm in power.
No, you're not.
Why not?
Because you're not in power. You're
Make me
not.
feel so small. You're
That's
supposed to be
okay.
good-natured.
I am not good-natured.
Well, that's quite obvious. If one thing I've learned, so you're not good-natured, and it's me.
I know. Go have a beer. I'll buy you a beer.
Oh, we're friends now.
Okay, now we're friends.
That's a good one. You take care now. Okay?
Josh Wells. He was hoping he'd get booed off the stage. All right, so to recap, before I was interrupted, Isabella Beecher Hooker always considered herself not worthy, too small, not smart enough, not good enough, not a good enough writer. She constantly compared herself to her sister, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who had all this fabulous success, well-deserved, and she could never, ever reach that level, and it bugged her. She was happy for her sister. She was jealous for her sister. Tell me you've not felt the same if you have a famous sibling, like, yay, I wish it was me. But no one is too small to get involved. So if you think, I don't know if I should, push yourself out of your comfort zone. She certainly did. And come to find out, Isabella loved her some spotlight. She loved telling those U.S. senators, switch places with me. I want to be up high. And they did. That's one. Don't you dare let anyone interrupt you. Journalists are perfect at this. We're horrible, horrible people. We just keep talking. People get uncomfortable when they're watching these talk shows and they're not letting a politician or whomever get a word in edgewise. We're trained for that. You will not interrupt me. I'm going to get to the end of this sentence. You can come with me if you want, or you can not, but I'm getting to the end of my sentence. Whatever political act you choose to take, whether it's working at the polls, knocking doors, postcards to voters, whatever political act you take, there's someone out there taking an equal and maybe sometimes not, taking an opposite and maybe more than equal act to stop what you're doing, to oppose what you're doing. I come from a completely conservative Republican family, except for my grandparents who were Democrats. And I don't care what party you are in. I don't. I'm sorry if you're in one of them because you're in a mess right now. But my grandmother would go out and vote Democrat, and my mother would skip out and say, I'm off to cancel your vote. And they did that every election for decades and decades until my grandma died. And if you can vote in heaven, she'd vote. Never went to stopped school at 8th grade, never went to college, never missed an opportunity to vote. So, knowing this, work harder than them. Understand there are people who don't agree with your politics. They're wrong. You can still love them, but work harder than them. Because we need you. Isabella needs you. Thank you. You got it, Josh. He's great. Sorry.
Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Please feel free to grab another drink from Thomas Hooker and Nate. If you'd like to explore the museum, you are more than welcome to, but drinks need to stay down here. They can't go up to our historic chambers upstairs. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask Susan at the end. But thank you so much for coming tonight to A Night at the Public House, Let Them Vote. We hope to see you at some of our future events. We have a huge series coming in July all about AI and technology and democracy called Control-Alt-Democracy. Did I get that right? And then we have our farmers market starting in the summer. So it'll be a really fun season here at the Old State House. So we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We also, if you have time, we have on your tables bookmarks that you're more than welcome to take. Our new thing is if you come to 3 of our programs and you take 3 of these different bookmarks, you get to visit us for free. We also, if you could, we would love to hear some of your feedback from tonight. Please fill out one of our surveys. They're on some of your tables as well as outside. There's also QR code versions of the surveys at both food tables, the bar, and outside. So thank you so much for coming and enjoy your night.